Okay, but into another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a really cool review for you from the brand Seiko. They were founded back in 1881. They are Japanese in origin and have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. In terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design when you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to want water resistance, typically with some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a dive extension is always nice if on bracelets. This is the Marine Master SLA Blue Wave model, and it is essentially a 500 piece US limited edition, and it is built on this very iconic at this point Marine Master 300 platform, which is a modern reinterpretation of Seiko's first 1968 saturation diver. And this, what makes this particular model special is that it has this great Japanese wave pattern dial deriving from an ancient Japanese tradition as a symbol of peace, good luck, and good fortune. You can actually get this piece pre-owned from the team over at Belmont Watches in San Diego for just $2,500, which is quite a deal. And you can see that it does come with some pretty cool cufflinks, which also have that same type of pattern. It doesn't come with the pen. I just felt like, man, the pen really just goes with this setup. So if you have questions about the pen, go ahead and ask away down in the comments. So again, a big shout out to Belmont Watches for sending this piece in so that I can take a close look, because this is actually a really cool example that otherwise I really wouldn't have had a chance to see in the metal, just because it is very limited, only 500 units, and it's just very niche, but it's really, really cool in the metal. So with that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, let's go ahead and check this piece out. Let's first just focus on the dial texture there. Ooh, that is absolutely beautiful. Definitely adds a great Japanese touch to, of course, an already iconically Japanese design from an iconic Japanese brand. And one thing you'll also notice is that it comes with this really great strap. I believe they have done some, at least the previous owner, because this is pre-owned, I believe they did kind of mix up some of the pairing to really optimize this, because typically you'll only get a metal keeper. You won't have the silicone one as well. And one thing I also did notice is that they did a wonderful job of shortening the other end of the strap here, and I can tell it's shorter because it wears smaller and has much less overhang. But the thing that kind of had me questioning it for a while was just because the ends didn't look too rough at all. I don't know how it's going to show up on camera, but I will say, to my eye, they did such a good job trimming this. It did make me question it quite a bit in terms of why it was such a reasonable size. Typically there'll be a lot of excess length to go over a wetsuit, but in terms of daily wear, having that extra length can be kind of a bother. So really cool that they did trim that up. So, one thing to note, that is modified, but also something really cool. Check out the cufflinks. Very, very cool. You can see pretty much reminiscent of the dial, not an exact one-to-one, but you get the picture. And of course, if you did want to dress up, I mean, it would be kind of crazy to try to fit this underneath a cuff, but you could have the matching cufflinks to it, or you could just have some sweet cufflinks and then, wear them on a different occasion, that you're not going to be wearing a huge dive watch under. Now, yes, the Marine Master 300 is known as being pretty huge, 44 millimeter diameter. That's not for everyone. 15 millimeter thickness, also not for everyone. Lug to lug, 50 millimeters. That is not for everyone, but somehow this watch, I've seen it on much smaller wrists than mine, and they're able to pull it off. And a lot of it has to do with the grammar of design in terms of Seiko, the beautiful undercuts, the compartmentalization of having lines that kind of can break the flow versus just straight slabs here and there. So they do a great job. Also, smaller dial that is centered, and then it has another chapter ring. So all these things, thicker bezel, kind of width there. So it all shrinks everything down visually. So it does end up making this a very manageable 44mm watch, which kind of still blows my mind to this day. This is a modern variation, so you are going to get ceramic. Typically, in the older models, you'll see a lacquered steel, which now you're seeing more and more often, kind of Seiko using, even in quite expensive models. I do think the lacquered steel is a great look, but for those of you that want to check the checkbox of ceramic, you can have ceramic here, and you do have partial lume. You can probably tell that the 10 is going to be, it's going to look slightly different than, let's say, the 50. And that's because white paint versus Lumibrite. This bezel, ooh. So beautifully balanced, guys. Ooh. The grip, the feel, it is just rock solid. Beautiful blend of smoothness and clickiness. So really, really great. 120 click. And then, of course, you do have the screw down crown, which is unsigned. But to be fair, the original model didn't have a signed crown either in terms of that original, I think it was the 6159. So also no case back, because this is a single chunk of steel apart from the bezel there, of course, and the crown. So with this setup, you can actually go saturation diving without the use of a helium escape valve. So very, very cool, and not something you see very often, because of course now when it comes to servicing or anything like that, you do have to go front loaded, which means the bezel comes off, the crystal comes out, dial comes out, and then you can get to the movement. Now, the movement inside is the Seiko automatic 8L35, which has a 50-hour power reserve, beats at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour, and typically will maintain tolerances between -10 and +15 seconds per day accuracy. Although many people have experienced much better than that. Typically, I have a couple of 8L35 powered watches, and they're doing very well. 8L35 and 8L55, as well as the 9S that the 8L is kind of an offshoot of, considering that this is a movement that is derived from a Grand Seiko movement, just with slightly less power reserve, and of course not regulated to the same level or decorated to the same level. Now, when we get into this dial, which is really the star of the show, beautifully raised indices, you're getting that Japanese wave textured dial. You still do get the date there, which with the lighting can be a bit awkward, but you can see it. And then, of course, you do have that kind of cutout where you can get that extra pip for the new ISO compliance in terms of having all 12 o'clock or 12 hours of the dial, marked with a pip. I don't think it's completely necessary, because if it's missing a pip, then that's 3 o'clock. You don't necessarily need to have something there to know the difference between 3 and 4, or 2 and 3. So when I don't see that little pip there, I'm okay, and when I do, I'm also still okay, though, because as long as at the end of the day, it's executed in a decent way, and in this case, I think it's okay. It's not it's not an eyesore, especially when you have a dial that has this much going on already. So this is 300 meters of water resistance, so that's great, and this is considered ISO compliant for saturation diving, and of course it is a recreation, reimagining, reinterpretation of Seiko's very first saturation diver. So I think that's also fantastic. It has 20mm lugs, which is great, so you can swap this out if you do have another idea something else you'd want to wear on it. And there are a lot of options. You can even get fitted end options that come from brands like Crafter Blue, where you can incorporate the actual Marine Master clasp with the ratcheting wetsuit extension, which I think is very, very cool. So with all that out of the way, let's actually get it on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, this wears beautifully. It's a bit tall, yes, but it wears its weight really, really well. And of course, if I do get it a bit too close to the camera lens here, you're gonna get a bit of perspective distortion. So what I like to do is keep my wrist nice and low and then just tighten up the shot so you guys can still get a detailed look at how this would lay, but just at a bit of a truer aspect ratio. And you can see even at 50 millimeters, it is quite well centered on my wrist. And also a thing to mention is I do have quite a round wrist. I don't have some big flat kind of wide wrist, even though I do have a slightly larger size wrist in terms of the circumference being 7.5 inches. I don't have a very flat wrist, so it's not like I'm, have more, space on my wrist. It's like a better canvas for larger watches by any means. There's probably people with smaller wrists than mine that might have a skinnier, flatter wrist that actually are going to wear larger watches probably even better than I do. So that is something to keep in mind. A wrist is three-dimensional. Don't just get thrown off and go, oh, well, that watch should look smaller on a 7.5-inch wrist. And, ultimately every wrist is different, especially when you're looking at things through the perspective of a camera lens. And although I'll do everything that I can to make sure that you are getting a true perspective or a truer perspective, it is one thing to just keep in mind that at the end of the day, we're not a bunch of floating talking wrists. There's a human body attached, and depending on the scale of that body will also depend on how a watch will wear on your wrist. So with all that said, let's actually get this piece off, set up for some loom shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. Hey, as you can see, Seiko LumaBrite doing its absolute job there. And also you can notice the beautifully partially loomed bezel insert there, which is totally going to work in terms of pure functionality. But of course, you're going to buy a special edition like this. It's not going to be your daily beater type of dive watch. It's going to be more something you would wear on a special occasion, maybe for diving, or something you'd take on vacation for a specific fun, right? This probably isn't going to be a professional diver's kind of daily tool that they're going to use. It's definitely meant to be more commemorative. And with that, one thing I always do like to work in, of course, is a bit of low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting, to maybe even include some harsh lighting, which typically could expose any type of production defects. But all you're going to see here is just beautiful details being lit up and reflected in different ways. Look at even underneath that black coating there, you can see the Zaratsu polish on that case, just beautifully reflecting the background. And of course that dial, very, very vibrant, not too in your face. You can see even with light playing on it there, it's typically going to have a bit of just a strip of a bright, vibrant blue, while the rest is going to be more of a midnight, and even transitionally looking very black most of the time. So very, very cool. And again, I do love that play of just having a bit of a loom added into that ceramic bezel. So very, very cool, guys. This is just such a handsome watch to behold. And now with the full lights on, you can really appreciate the blue in that dial. And of course, just the artisan craftsmanship in terms of application of the dial itself. Do I wish they did this dial in a steel case, without the coating? Yeah, I do. The good news is they do. a red version of it with the steel case, which looks absolutely killer. I wish they would do something like this, with a with the steel, exposed steel case as well, just because the blue is just so beautiful. The blacked out thing isn't always my style, but I have to say this does come together. And although on paper it's not something I would be out looking for, after seeing it in person, I can totally understand. And of course, if I saw this on anybody's wrist, I would be in a hurry to take a closer look. So closing thoughts, guys, on the wrist, definitely a bit top heavy, but still extremely wearable. The Marine Master 300's unique proportions do a magical job of keeping this serious tool watch quite tidy on the wrist, surprisingly enough. Now, in terms of model variants, at this point, there are many variations within the Marine Master 300 line alone. But the most directly related variation would be the red wave dialed SLA059, which trades the black DLC, for a clear Dia shield coating and adds a bracelet. So if you do like this style, you can also kind of find that space. Of course, it would be a red dial, which is also extremely cool. But this blue one is the one that's for sale at a discounted price from Belmont Watches, that has like the cool modified strap. So there's all those benefits there. So in terms of comparable models, there's not really too much to cross shop the Marine Master 300 against. Either you really want one or you don't. Honestly, it's quirky but flawed, but it still kind of remains beloved by many. So it obviously has certain things that work for it. It's not really meant to be the watch for everyone, but for those someones who enjoy it, they're really gonna just love this a whole lot. So for me, guys, bottom line, if you already do have a lot of crossover within your watch collection, I feel like this could really be the perfect addition to slot in and bring a lot of unique yet timeless character to an already eclectic collection. So no, I don't think this is going to be anybody's one watch collection, or within their 3 watch collection, this would be their dedicated diver. I do think this is going to be a much better piece for people that have upwards of 8 or 9 watches, where things can feel a little bit more special on purpose, and you can be okay with some of the trade-offs, some of the thickness, some of the particulars in terms of the colorway and what matches and what doesn't match. I think for you to really appreciate this watch to that level, you're probably gonna have a larger collection, or this might just totally be your dream watch when you see it, and like, if you could make a watch, it would look like this. And if that's the case, get this and enjoy it, and don't buy any other watches, because you won't need them if this is really your dream thing. And I could see this being quite a dream machine. I mean, I would say the last couple of local watch meetups and gatherings I've went to, the Marine Master 300 has come up probably at least once every time. It's just it's a point of contention for so many people, whether it be to impart praise on the watch, or talk about the ones that got away and had to get rebought, or still need to be rebought. So with all that said, let me know what you guys all think in the comments below. If you like the video, please hit like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. And of course, again, a big shout out and thank you to the folks over at Belmont Watches for lending this piece in. Make sure you do check the links in the description for more information on purchasing. Thanks, guys.